Hello and welcome to the Black Soldier Fly Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, David Tavernor, and in this series we dig beneath the surface to uncover what's really happening inside the Black Soldier Fly industry. Hello and welcome to the Black Soldier Fly Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, David Tavernor, and this is episode 1 with Clayton Payne. How's it going, mate?
Awesome, dude. Awesome. Thanks a million for getting me onto your brand new podcast. Glad to see you getting the information out.
No, I'm looking forward to speaking to you. And I hear you've been 2 weeks in Vegas and Arizona, right? You must be knackered.
Yeah, no, I am. I'm slightly demented, slightly tired, but all good. All good. You know me, never stops. Can't afford to, to stop doing stuff. So yeah, no, I'm all good. I'm all good, sir.
Good stuff. Cool. I'm going to get straight into it. So tell me your story, how you got to where you are now.
So I grew up in a pet store. My parents were pet shop owners, and my dad was had a distribution business. At 20 years old, me and a friend of mine set up a distribution business, which we ran for 22 years, going from very small to like over 4 million a year. We sold out in 2019, and yeah, like I had some personal problems, which sort of led me to needing to get out. So my missus lost her leg in a car accident, and I just became very stressed, with the long hours I was having to work. And then I exited the business in March 2020, just in time for COVID. So I then got stuck working for the NHS, worked on the front line of the NHS during COVID. At the same time, I'd been doing international development degrees, and I was doing my master's at SOAS, and then I was doing environmental science reports, mainly in the South Caucasus, but in other areas as well. And yeah, I was also a consultant for a number of pet food businesses at the same time. So I've always had a strong interest in insects because being a wholesaler, I had a lot of sales on wild bird foods, and I kind of, obviously was slightly bothered by the fact that nearly all dried insects were being brought in from China, rather than actually being produced sort of domestically, where we already have the ability to produce these things at the right sort of price levels, etc. And yeah, I started working with Tom at the Bug Factory. He just created a mealworm grain pod system. So basically, I sort of came in to give him sort of commercial ability. I took the product, got it distributed in the US, sold it to Petco, Chewy, Tractor Supply in the US, got distribution in Australia, in the EU, UK, and then Tom pivoted the business towards industrial breeding, so towards black soldier fly rearing, and now after a few years of doing that, I'm sort of more back strongly in the pet industry. I obviously do my pet industry podcast, which is now the world's most downloaded pet industry podcast in the world, over 40,000 downloads a month. So it's that's been going well for me, and it's kind of sort of drawn me back more into the sort of more generic pet industry rather than, let's say, just being in black soldier fly like I was for a couple of years.
And what's that podcast called? Get that plug in.
Pet Business Disruptors. So I've actually had a couple of black soldier fly people on there. So I had Manor Insect on there, and I had David Fluker from Fluker Farms and Soldier Fly Technologies on there as well, talking about black soldier fly, and a couple of black soldier fly dog food companies. I had Jiminy's and Grub Club on.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I've listened to all of those, actually. Some good listens. So you've had a really rich experience in the pet industry. Exactly how does that tie into black soldier fly in your view?
Well, so if you look at black soldier fly as large as a thing, it's sort of initial offerings are looking at going through pet industry because prices are higher, although scale is lower than, let's say, human food. So I think it's the initial cut in people look for when they look at black soldier fly initially. And I mean, look, you've probably seen the presentations like I have at these seminars where it's we're looking at the pet food industry. The pet food industry is growing by X amount of billions per year, and black soldier fly, the control of the sector and this sort of stuff. And the margins are higher, as an ingredient in pet food. There's less resistance to people using insects. And let's say in the US, you have, let's say, people feeding chickens quite heavily on insects in terms of backyard breeders and that sort of stuff, backyard or homesteading communities, which we don't have in Europe as strongly. But yeah, so look, it's the pet food industry is kind of like the ground zero for black soldier fly. Like number one, because you can command a higher price, but also people have a lot less resistance towards feeding their pets on insects rather than themselves.
And from my experience, people I've spoken to, I've heard that the market is already saturated. We have the supply, at least in Europe anyway, we have the supply of black soldier flies that's already meeting the demand for pet food. So, with the likes of Protix and others who are producing for the European pet food market, does that match your experience? If you were a new black soldier fly business that had or was starting to produce supply, would it be able to get into the pet food industry?
In a word, like no. I would say not only is it saturated, but I also think black soldier fly sales when it comes to dog food are actually on the decline.
On the decline?
I would say they're on the decline. So if you look at what's happened in the last 12 months, so this year at Crufts, which is the world's biggest dog show, there was, for the first year in countless years, there was no black soldier fly dog food company at Crufts. In the last 12 months, we've seen Procuro disappear. We've seen, there's a Dutch one, sort of Teddy something disappear. Eura has been absorbed by Canagan and has been not non-prioritized as an independent business within that remit. They weren't at Super Zoo this year in the US.
Okay, so they've been bought, but non-prioritized.
Yeah,
Why
so look,
would they
okay,
buy them, not prioritize
because
them?
okay, the Canagan Group has some shared ownership with the Pets Corner Group, which also owned Eura. So within the Pets Corner Group, so the reason Eura became so big so quickly within Pets Corner is Pets Corner has its own range of brands which run as independent companies. So companies like McAdams, like Eura, and some others. The brands which are, let's say, loss making or non-profitable are now being absorbed into Canagan. So although it is essentially an acquisition, it's kind of like, it's almost like a forced acquisition. So McAdams, which is their premium sort of dog food brand, is also having the same thing happen to them. So basically the Eura as a standalone company was failing. They are, without a doubt, probably the biggest dog food, like black soldier fly dog food brand in the world.
Yeah, if anyone's in the black soldier fly industry, they know Eura, definitely.
Yeah. And so Eura basically has been absorbed into Canagan, and Canagan are more interested in Canagan products than they are in Eura. So Eura has, on the one hand, it's benefited them because Canagan have a very strong representation amongst the independent pet trade in the UK. So it has opened doors for them in that sense of getting them into independent pet stores. But my read of independent pet stores in the UK is they're not interested in black soldier fly in dog food generally. This comes, I think, down to bad positioning for the industry. Like, and I've talked about this extensively. They talk about sustainability and they talk about hypoallergenic as being the main sales points for black soldier fly. Sustainability does not sell products. It's also because it's very hard to quantify sustainability. Lots of products claim sustainability, but also no one walks into a pet store and says, what is your most sustainable dog food? They ask, what's the best, or what's got the best protein rate, or what's, what,
Or
like, I've got to
price.
feed the dog, and they don't say give us the most sustainable thing. Hypoallergenic is also one of those like nonsense terms that like a lot of people claim, and it just means less likely to be allergenic, which, number one, black soldier fly doesn't really meet that criteria because the chitin in black soldier fly actually puts it more in line with things like certain shellfish, which are allergenic, like when exposed to long-term use, but also, just as a sales line, hypoallergenic is applied to a lot of different proteins. So it's applied to venison, it's applied to a number of different other things, which are a lot cheaper. It just means it's an alternative novel protein market, and there's a lot of novel proteins out there. There's kangaroo meat out there, there's ostrich meat out there. There's lots of different things you can use which are hypoallergenic, if you want to use that term, and that are cheaper than black soldier fly. So those two positioning standards of black soldier fly has put it in a weird position where people are just not really that interested, to be honest, especially
Well,
at the price.
I'm looking forward to feeding my dog some kangaroo meat because that definitely won't be the most sustainable because we know that where that's come from.
No, but again, it's you can make the claims of kangaroo meat on based on the amino acid contents. It's got a very unique amino acid profile, kangaroo meat. Um, and look, at the end of the day, do people buy on sustainability? Like, I don't believe they do. I think it's second or third on the buying criteria.
Yeah, I would share my own insight there from my days as a buyer at Tesco, is that absolutely people do not buy on sustainability as their primary purchase driver. Price, quality, if it's constantly in stock and they get to know the brand quality as well, all influence higher than sustainability in my experience. Obviously, you will get a lot of customers out there who would prioritize sustainability, but it's few and far between. Today's world. You've talked about price being able, black soldier fly protein in pet food is not able to compete with the likes of venison and others on price. Venison is famously expensive. So explain that to me. Is it because it's a byproduct or?
Yeah. So look, again, it's sort of like when we look at venison meat meal, which is what we're really looking at comparing, because when we talk about comparing BSF meal, we're comparing it against other meals. And so venison meat meal is what we're looking at. Venison meat meal is around £2,000 a ton, I believe, current market prices, which is still significantly more expensive than chicken meal, which is between £700 to £1,000 a ton. But then the current black soldier fly pricing is around the £3,000 a ton mark. Now, just intuitively, if you said to a buyer, like put these in order of like what the price should be, black soldier fly, venison, chicken, I think most people would expect black soldier fly to be the cheapest, with chicken being in the middle and venison being the most expensive. Whereas actually chicken is the cheapest, with black soldier fly the most expensive. And then what ends up happening is when they create these dog food rations, um, because black expensive, they then have to create a price point product matches the venison. They have to include less animal protein and more vegetable proteins. So there becomes a drive to bulk out with more peas, more sweet potato, more things like that, which actually lowers the quality of the product. So people end up buying a lesser quality product for the same price as they would do in other categories. And so look, it just doesn't add up, is the problem.
Yeah, so this happened in the cost of living crisis, didn't it? Where with normal products, where they removed good ingredients to keep the price or stop the price from inflating too much because the consumer didn't want that. And so this is happening in black soldier fly as well. And it's pretty fascinating that, like you said, the customer would like black soldier fly to be the lowest price, but actually it's the highest price. So actually, if a producer could get the same price as venison at £2,000 a ton, do you think that that offers an opportunity to start competing, or does it really need to get cheaper than, or at least
I
on
think
par with chicken?
I think it increases the opportunity. I still don't think it makes it look, because at the end of the day, still venison still isn't the biggest selling meat-based thing on the market. Most products are chicken or beef, possibly lamb, then in a sort of a distant third place, with everything else trailing a long way behind. So I think it offers more opportunity, because I think what we're seeing black soldier fly struggling, like to really sort of get any kind of foothold anywhere. And I think if you could match the price of venison meal or ostrich or something like this, then maybe you could actually go, okay, well we can put it into this category more effectively. But I think I'm not really sure um, that would move the needle that much in terms of volume. I think really I think almost the dog food market needs completely repositioning, and it needs to be, and I've been saying this for a while, it needs to be more of a percentage inclusion, and it needs to be focusing on black soldier flies individual USPs, which is, let's say, the lauric acid content, the antimicrobial benefits, but then not being used as like as a 40% inclusion, but maybe being used as a 5 to 10% inclusion, like alongside other protein sources, because I don't see that it has the value to be a single protein source inside the dog food. I don't see the marketability of it, and I don't see the consumer uptake in it, to be honest.
Clayton, have you heard of a company called Moltento in South Africa? Yeah, so last year I visited their site and spoke to the CEO, Dean Smorenberg, and they're doing exactly that. So that's really interesting. They're basically selling their black soldier fly protein as a an inclusion into for pet food brands. So then you can get that nutrition profile, the lauric acid, the amino acid profile of the black soldier fly protein, and include it with all of the nutritional benefits, but also the bulk protein of the chicken or the venison or whatever protein or bulk protein you go for. And what that does, it gives them the opportunity to set their price point at what works for them. But because it's a small inclusion, like you said, it doesn't actually add too much cost to the product. However, it does give them the brands opportunity to market insect protein, but like you said, not as the hero product, but as that additional supplement or whatever you might call it, which I think is a really sensible idea. Yes, it's not going to, drive mass change because it's not the bulk protein, but it's a foot in the door, and it's an ability to scale. To scale.
I mean, there's a couple of European companies doing it at the moment. So in the UK, we have Tugs, which is a fresh food company which uses a percentage inclusion in their fresh food diets. And then in Europe, you have the Bafo group under the Brit brand, who do a range of dry foods which are similar, which also
And
have insect
how do they
protein.
market it?
Again, like, I don't think they market it very well. Like, and again, I think you need to focus on the health benefits of insect to dogs, really, to gain traction on it. Whereas it's almost, again, still being marketed as a sustainability edge, which I don't think moves the needle.
So tell me exactly, like, so if you've got a bag of kibble for dogs, 35% chicken, 5% black soldier fly, and the rest is the carbs and the fat and things like that. If I've got those proportions vaguely right anyway, just tell me exactly how you would, as Clayton Payne, the pet food marketing expert.
What I would be talking about, and again, you've got to put enough inclusion in actually to move the needle on these points, but I would be talking about the lauric acid content and how it benefits overall gut health, like immune system, that sort of stuff. The chitin obviously is a natural prebiotic. There's antimicrobial properties which can help things like teeth and that sort of stuff. That's kind of what I would be looking at pushing as part of the mix. But again, it's making sure that you actually are honest and put enough in that actually does these things, and that it's not such a small enough amount that it doesn't really make a difference, because that's what we call bag tagging in the industry, where you put, let's say, glucosamine in, but you put so little in that it actually has no effect, or that it gets, or like the kibbling process like destroys that side of it. So it's about putting enough in where it actually does move the needle on these things. I think that's really where it has to lie. But again, like, how viable is that? Because it's a huge marketing campaign, it's a huge information drive, and we're at the beginning of that. And I think most people, when they think of black soldier fly, they've already been beaten down with this hypoallergenic sustainable thing for so long that the actual amount of work somebody's got to put into that initially on what is just an ingredient at the end of the day, is it would need to come from the producers, that sort of push, not from the dog food brands, because the dog food brands, it's just not, it wouldn't be viable, to be honest, in my opinion, because I put all that work into creating this market for a black soldier fly inclusion. It works, and everyone else does the same thing. So from my perspective as a producer, I would need the industry needs to be one that's doing that stuff rather than the actual brand per se.
It seems like in the black soldier fly and pet industry that there seems to be, it seems a bit disjointed by what you're saying. People are perhaps losing faith in the industry, or is it a temporary lag based on markets and things like that?
No, I think it's a loss of faith. I think it's a loss of faith. I think that things run in cycles. There's always something hot in the industry, and I think if you went back to 2022, at Nuremberg in 2022, like, insect was hot. It was the thing that everyone was talking about. Is like, we're all going to get into insects. Insects are, a really great way of creating dog food and blah blah blah. But now, 3 years on, 3.5 years on, it's kind of burning out. And I think once everything kind of shakes down, there will be people out there who will still carry on and do okay. But it's definitely not the growth area everyone expected. And if there's not hype behind something, it dies. And at the moment, all the hype now is behind fresh food, like in the pet food industry, about like freshly cooked stuff. So, and kibble as a product is taken a huge amount of battering in the last couple of years from raw food people, from fresh food people, and that sort of stuff, and from nutrient loss from the cooking process, etc. So it's not a good time to be in kibble anyway. And so trying to produce a new kibble food which has different USPs isn't the right thing. I mean, even Mars Pet Foods, they've started producing a wet-based product under the Royal Canin brand because they can see that's where the market shifted. So if black soldier fly as an ingredient wants to stay relevant, it actually has to like fit into these newer industries like the raw pet food industry, like the fresh pet food industry, because that's where the steam is coming from at the moment. And other than toads, I'm not really seeing that.
So we're talking Michelin star steak and cricket burger for your dog, and then give yourself some kibble afterwards just to get you through to bedtime.
I mean, if you look at raw dog food has come from 0.5% of the dog food market in the UK from 15 years ago to more than 10% today. Fresh food is, I think, sitting around 15% from like an absolute nothing 10 years ago. So this is where all the hype is, and black soldier fly isn't fitting into this. Black soldier fly really is looking at the kibble market, and people are saying, well, I don't really want to feed kibble because nutrient loss from the the high end cooking process, or and like cold press never really has kicked off. There are cold press companies that have an insect inclusion, so Wilson's, Bug Bakes, people like that are doing it, but they've all kind of seen that side of their business stagnate enormously, and none of them are actually putting their effort into that side of the business anymore. So yeah, I think it's a real problem.
Interesting. It seems pretty bleak, to be honest, Clayton. But I did catch one slither of positivity there. You said it might work for some. This was probably about 5 minutes back. In what cases do you think it would work? Is this for small scale kind of premium brand pet food, or are we talking different markets?
I think look, there is still possibilities with it. I still think it has its position, and I think there are smaller brands which can still do stuff. It's just not going to take over the world. It's never going to be the protein of dog food, like the protein of choice of dog food. That's just not something that's ever going to happen because of price, because of consumer acceptance. But there's still, it'll still work. Eura's not going away. Eura will still be a thing. Like insect dog food is here to stay. It's just not here to stay in a way which is more than any pet shop having possibly one SKU of based dog food on the shelf.
Yeah, it'll operate as a niche.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Understood. So all of these insect factories that are going up with venture capital, based on your predictions, won't have an outlet in pet food because you can only really have one doing it.
Yeah, there's an oversaturation of companies already in that market, and the capacity we have potentially for black soldier fly for dog food is already exceeded, and I don't see that growing. Because obviously we've seen the graphs where every year it's gone up by 20% or 15% or 100% or whatever, but these are from very small numbers, and actually I'm not seeing long-term growth in that sector.
Sure.
I see that there's going to be a stagnation, and there will be a loss of companies as they stop getting investor money.
Which would only harm the industry more.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Because that's the thing. Investor money isn't out there like it was, especially in that side of it. And look, if you say insect dog food to companies now, they've heard of it and they're just not interested a lot of the time. Rather than, I've never heard of it before, I'm not sure about it. It's more like, tried it, done it, didn't really sell. That's kind of where we're at now, to be honest.
It's a real shame, that is. But thanks for explaining it. It's been really insightful. So moving on, we've been talking about the pet industry a lot. What about black soldier flies and what you're doing in black soldier flies? So you mentioned at the start that you are doing something with Thomas Constant, your business partner. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so where I do see the growth in black soldier fly in the pet industry is more through wild bird food. So at the moment, insect in the UK and the EU is still dominated by Chinese production, and there is no resistance, obviously, to feeding black soldier fly or mealworms to wild birds. And really, that's the angle we're looking down. to be honest. So, but it's not the whiz bang multi-billion pounds a year sort of excitement thing that people would necessarily want. But I do think that there needs to be a successful model for insect production in Europe, because at the moment people are either looking at markets that are oversaturated, or markets where they're just so far off the money on price. So, or like we're never going to. It's sort of like when you talk to people in black soldier fly, they're like, "Oh yes, soy is the long-term goal, but then we're also looking at fish meal on the way." Now, number one, fish meal. Fish meal is a 70% protein product, whereas black soldier fly meal is a 55 to 60% protein product. So it's not directly comparable. So therefore, then really, you're not really aiming at fish meal, which is a £1,500 a ton product. You're really then back to lining up against something like chicken meal, which is again a 700 to 800,000 pound a ton product. Because it's not comparable, it doesn't fit the mark like you'd want it to fit. And when and then you say, well, okay, it's more bioavailable for fish than something like chicken meal, but big scale fish food production is about price. It's not, like quality is great. Again, there's other ways they can tweak quality without doubling their price on let's say a main protein base. And then when we talk about soybean meal, we talk about, soybean meal is basically a byproduct of the soybean oil product industry. And I don't see in the short to medium term how we'll ever get towards that sort of like £300 to £400 a ton mark. So what we need to do in the meantime is create something that works and then gradually refine from there, and actually use every single part of the process to its absolute maximum potential. Because that's the only way we're actually going to get to this point. And the protein itself, rather than being the price driver, has to actually be a byproduct of the entire industry, because that's how most other things seem to work, to be honest.
I've heard this from other people as well, and it's kind of working in my head how that's going to work, because there's other products that's created from insects. There's frass, there's oil. You could even make a case in certain economies to make a business based on the actual input, the waste input, and taking gate fees or having partnerships with governments of how to bioprocess waste. Do you have any view on which one would be the revenue leader for a black soldier fly business?
What do you think? It has to come down to legislation change and gate fees, because frass, when you look at frass, I mean, do you know what? I didn't know anything about fertilizer coming into the black soldier fly industry, and you just hear people all the time saying, "Oh, frass, great fertilizer, blah blah blah," and then you look into the fertilizer industry, and once you actually understand how fertilizer works, you realize frass is virtually valueless. To be honest, it has the same value as like cow manure and that sort of stuff. That actually, when you talk about NPK values, it's about balancing. And so, let's say a 40-00 like fertilizer is dirt cheap, and that's actually far more useful than a frass, which is like got a 212 value. Do you know what I mean? And you need 50 20 20, let's say, on your field. Do you know what I mean? The amount of frass you'd have to use is actually astronomical to actually get the NPK ratios right. And then then you can go down into cannabis farming and that sort of stuff and talk about the chitin and blah blah blah. But then we fall down these like real niche holes where there's no volume. And like if you're talking about scale production, like in the case of these mega factories that want to pop up and do all this product, who's the end user for this product? Because standard agriculture isn't, so then we start looking at like, oh yeah, but then it could be pot plants and that sort of stuff. And that's fine. Like a small percentage in pot plants is fine. But then what percentage of the market are you really going to take? We're talking small numbers all the time compared to what's actually being produced. Because then obviously then you hear about things like frass being used in feed and that sort of stuff. And it's sort of like, again, it's trying to find other ways of sort of valorizing different part. And I just think the problem is that everybody set themselves up to need too much money per ton for their outputs than where the market actually really will stand. And so for me, like falling into wild bird food, which is already a low value industry. I mean, just for context, if I buy dry black soldier fly from China, Um, I can get it landed in the UK for around £2,000 a ton mark, and that's so it's. I think I want to say it's about $800 to $1,000 FOB China.
So half of it is actually in the delivery.
Yeah. So, but just for domestic use, let's say we're paying £2,000 a ton. Now, again, that's dry weight, so you're obviously getting rid of the water weight, which is what 60% odd. So, in terms of like live weight, we're talking what £700 a ton, something like that. That's your break even
That's your
point
benchmark.
that's your benchmark where you even start to make sense in the market. So, when the current price of things like puree is like what. So again, we're already having to go a long way down
And
just to
is puree essentially live, the price of live insects, is it? Plus
pretty
bit of
much. Well, actually,
processing.
but they actually add water to puree as well, so it's
Oh.
actually a bit. It's actually not as much as live,
It's
to be
diluted.
honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that price
But
needs
yeah,
to come
so
down.
look, massively, the price of live needs to come down massively.
And
but that's just to make any kind of sense with anything which is even approaching scale.
so then the venture that you're going into is that targeting the wild bird feed market?
Yeah.
Okay. And talk about tons and your potential for actually in capturing that price. Two different questions. Go.
Okay, right. The potential for capturing that price it's possible, like under current legislation, to just about pull that price off and be minimally profitable. And I think that's obviously, I'm not into bullshit. I'm not into telling people that we're gonna produce tons and tons of stuff and it's gonna be hyper profitable. The truth is that you can do it if you do it in a very back to basics, low tech way and be minimally profitable at that level. Like, so we get our wages paid, the company would make a small amount of money. But what it does do is it gives like a long term ability then to actually test in the market with other product lines. In terms of scale, we're only talking current black soldier fly sales in the UK, we're probably talking 300-400 ton a year. We're not talking enormous tonnage
For wild bird feed.
Well, wild bird food, yeah. Now, mealworms, on the other hand, is massive, and you would kind of hope that if we can like be a UK product and blah blah blah, you could maybe push some of that mealworm sales out because mealworms are more expensive. But the market at the moment is mealworm driven, so it's a very mealworm oriented market at the moment.
And what do the customers say about that? Why would they stick with mealworm if they've got the option?
Because they're used to mealworms. The birds generally prefer them because just shape-wise, they're a little bit easier to consume. Black soldier flies are a little bit chunkier, so the smaller birds struggle to get around them as well. And also, just like mealworms are the first to market, and black soldier fly, although they're cheaper, they're not so much cheaper. If you were at a garden centre and you saw a 600-gram bag of black soldier fly for X price, and for the same price you saw a 400-gram bag of mealworms, if you've always fed mealworms, why are you changing? Do you know what I mean? There has to be a stronger driver in there than just it's a little bit cheaper, to be honest. So I think really that's kind of like where it sits, is that you kind of have to take the market that's already there. Now, what is true is for black soldier flies, it's used a lot in, let's say, insect suet products. So, for example, things like fat cakes, things like suet pellets, other products like that. So that's really the market. Rather than being sold as a whole dried insect, it would be more like sort of ground and sold into, like a lot of the suet companies that are over here. So people like Unipet, Harvest, people like that would be buying it and then putting it into their insect-based suet products. But again, it's a reasonable market, but it's not going to set the world on fire.
Okay. Getting to that price level, you've said that the puree in the market at the moment is £1,100-1,200 in the UK. I haven't seen any UK companies who can successfully produce it at less than £700 per ton. How are you going to do it? You don't have to share that, by the way.
It's simple. It's like absolute minimal costings, right? I mean, you can't afford to have, as a producer of ingredients, a marketing manager and a this manager and a that manager and a high-tech warehouse and a boardroom. It has to be very back to basics. Very back to basics, very low cost operation. Absolutely everything done minimally. And then the numbers will just about work.
So I agree with that.
Like,
but then, when it comes to feedstock in the UK, we've got certain regulations meaning that we can't feed basically all of the stuff that black soldier fly would do great eating on in this world. The post-consumer food waste, the manures and things like that. So then we're competing with livestock farmers with anaerobic digesters for this product. So that must add costs that you just can't avoid, right?
Yeah, so at the moment, the only way to do it realistically is, so I live in the Fens, which has huge production of vegetables and especially things like waste potatoes, etc. So you would need to locate the warehouse near to where that waste is being produced. And look, you can buy waste potatoes and waste veg mixes and that sort of stuff for sub 50 pounds. So sort of like £18 a tonish, £10 a tonish. It depends. And if there's no transport costs involved, because like the moment you have to ship the stuff, forget it, it's already dead. That's kind of where you have to be. Everything, like I say, everything has to be cut to the core. You can't. And look, it's possible to do it at those levels if you can cut everything to the core, but you actually have to be located where the waste is. You actually have to make sure that there is a volume there, which will actually, and you also can't be choosy on what you have. And this is why it takes you out of the dog food market, is that wild bird food market, you can have nutritional variation in the black soldier fly, whereas the dog food market, you can't. And that's why with the dog food market, there'll be people feeding on things like chicken food and stuff, because you kind of need to keep those nutritional values the same, because I can't have a 10% variation in certain analytics, because once it goes into the dog food, you can't change the name, the details on the back every time you run a new production of dog food. So the dog food market is out the window. It has to be wild bird food, where there is no real, long sort of hard push on nutritional stability of the product.
So the buyers or the customers of wild bird food don't really care on the nutritions or the variability of the nutrition, just as long as they have something that looks like a black soldier fly, a dried black soldier fly, so that they can put into their bird feeders.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, look, I mean, you're feeding wild animals at the end of the day, or wild birds. I mean, it's not the same as feeding your pet dog, There's a very different level goes into these things, which is why, again, this is why the chicken market, you can't get into the chicken market in the UK in terms of, let's say, hobbyist chicken owners, because what's currently being brought over is being brought over from China, and they're not sure about, let's say, the quality of the feedstocks and the stuff going into your birds coming into you. Whereas in the US, they actually would crap about that. It's, you can feed whatever in the US. And actually their big worry at the moment is more with tariffs coming from China rather than like the quality of the product. But look, the US market for this stuff is much, much bigger.
So there's an opportunity there for a US producer to capture it.
Yeah, because you have like the homesteading communities, which are genuinely massive. So I was just at the Mid-States Fall Fair, which is for a lot of the farm and ranch companies. So not the real big ones. So Rural King and Tractor Supply weren't there, which are massive. I mean, Tractor Supply is over 2,000 stores nationwide. But there was still, the equivalent, I think it was like 37 different companies, which, between them have, let's say, a nice few thousand stores between them, So the farm and ranch thing in America is genuinely massive.
Yeah, okay. And also, like you said, there's not as many feedstock regulations over there for black soldier flies. Plus, they don't have the anaerobic digestion or biogas infrastructure like we do over here. So therefore, you're not competing for that feedstock as much, and you can get it. Yeah, there's gate fees for those available for those companies. So perhaps more opportunity over there than in the UK. So final question, Clayton. I would like to step into the future. And what's your company called? BO Buyer. Yeah, that's it. So we step forward 5 years into the future of BO Buyer. You've been successfully bootstrapping the business with a bit of investment as well by selling into wild bird feed, amongst other products as well. What do you think in 5 years' time, you've got to that point, you're profitable, but albeit at a smallish scale still? What's the next move?
I think it's about creating a range of products which can go into different industries and not trying to be sort of catch-all products. So it's not like saying, well, we'd love you to feed your fish on instead of fish meal on black soldier fly more. If, rather than using a 20%, chicken meal inclusion, we've shown tests of 5% will increase growth by X amount, and it can be part of your premium fish line and this sort of stuff. But because you're producing regularly on a regular basis, there's a lot of work you can do. And I'm not sure where those opportunities are going to come from, but I do know that with regular production and regular like product coming through, that you actually at least have the ability to test those. And if you are a price focused company, which is what you have to be in ingredients. I mean, look, you're a Tesco buyer, you understand ingredients are just about price and quality. There's not, the brand of ingredients is irrelevant, or the stories behind ingredients aren't that important. That it's about just being like, how can we fit into the market, and what products can we actually push into the market which will make sense, and trying to build the industry that way. And look, yeah, it will take a while. It will take a while, but actually having that stuff on hand and having it at a price which can potentially meet market expectations is the way, I think, to actually grow the industry.
Fair enough. Well, Clayton, I'm going to round it up there. It's been great to have you on the pod as the first guest. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thanks a million, Dave.
No worries. Cheers, dude.
Cheers, man.